Welcome all to 5 practical tips for better social marketing. My name is Michael Gilbert, and I will be walking you through 5 practical tips. Let's get started. So RivalIQ is a leader in social marketing data. We help digital marketing professionals make informed decisions about their social media content using comparative and competitive information. Our goal is to help our social marketers make more effective choices on when, where, and what to post so that they're getting the most out of each and every post they're making within social media. When we talk about who we work with, it is an absolute slew of companies and ranges over a number of different industries. Everything from banks to agencies to manufacturers to as far down as sports teams and shoe companies. If you are looking to reach your audience via social media marketing, we really feel like we are the right choice to help you guide those decisions. So, having said that, let's get started with our presentation. We're talking about practical tips for setting up a successful social media marketing campaign. One of the first things that we always mention is setting benchmarks for yourself within social media. We actually work with Atkins Nutritional. They were a client who used RivalIQ to establish a baseline for their social media strategy. And that was incredibly important for them because then they could take that baseline and use it to test new campaigns, new initiative, new messaging, new types of posts, and understand each and every time how they were performing in the social media sphere. By using that baseline, they were able to garner their results and absolutely were able to crush it in social media, raising their Twitter engagement by 51% and Facebook engagement by 31%. And setting benchmarks and establishing benchmarks does not need to be very complex. We'll just show a simple example. Here I'm looking at RivalIQ, but you could use any number of tools. All we're talking about is getting a good baseline in terms of what's my audience? How many people are currently following, liking me on the variety of social media pages that I have out there? So in this case, I'm looking at Tesla Motors. They have an overall market of 6.5 million, and I can break that down by each individual channel. Understanding where your audience is and how you're performing in terms of audience is important, but it's equally important to understand how those audience members are engaging and what your engagement rate looks like. So as we're trying to test new strategies, we're trying to test new messaging, we can understand what our baseline is, what our benchmark is, so that we can see how we're improving. Also, when we talk about benchmarking, we also talk about competitive benchmarking. So not only how are we performing, but how does that look when we look at the competitors in our area? So in this example, I'm looking at Tesla, and maybe I just look at the big 3 here, and how do they compare to the other major car manufacturers in the United States? What does their audience look like? How often are those competitors posting? And how often and what kind of engagement rate are they seeing for those competitors? That's really instructional in helping me to say, are we doing a good job? Are we excelling? And if we aren't excelling, what areas, what platforms, where are competitors seeing engagement totals? In this example, we can see that the competitors for Tesla are seeing a lot more engagement on Instagram as an example. So that's our first practical tip for social media marketing. Number 2 is follow the competition. And this seems fairly basic, and it doesn't need to be horribly complex, but understanding and what content, what channels, what places really resonate with the audience you're trying to reach. A classic example of this is a nonprofit we work with called the Lung Cancer Alliance. They had a very small social media marketing team, and they needed to understand what sorts of posts, what sorts of messaging were going to help them reach their donors and volunteers. And because they didn't have the time or energy to spend doing a lot of A/B testing, what they wanted to know is for the major nonprofits, people that had a larger social media budget, what messages were they putting out there that really resonated with that audience, that were driving engagement and were getting the most kind of bang for their buck. And so they took a look and they loaded up all of their kind of key competitors, so large people like the Cancer Alliance, the Fred Hutchinsons of the world, to really understand what posts those people are doing and how they were investing their dollars in social media so they could make smart decisions about where they want to invest. And following the competition doesn't need to be terribly difficult. It can be as simple as going to each of the individual platforms and taking a close look at those competitors. Or you can use, in this case, a tool like RivalIQ and a feature what we call social posts to gather and basically get all of those posts in one place. So here I'm looking at the last 30 days of data for Tesla and what it's identified as its primary competitors. And so for an organization like Tesla, they can come up here as a smaller company and see where are competitors investing. How often are they posting versus how we're posting? What's their engagement rate? Are they using hashtags? Simple kind of analysis that lets us tell us where we ought to be posting. We can look at hashtags. Are we using the right hashtags? Are those hashtags driving engagement? If there are hashtags we aren't using, should we be leveraging those hashtags to garner a bigger audience? What channels? So where are we posting versus our competitors, and what channels are driving the most engagement? So in this particular landscape, Instagram is driving a much higher engagement rate. Having said that, the audience is much smaller. What type of post? Is it photos? Is it status updates? Is it links? Is it videos? For the audience I'm trying to reach, what sort of content is going to resonate based on competitive information? You can use a tool like RivalIQ. You can use basically any tool out there to really help understand what you need to do and what your competitors are doing that's successful. That takes us to our third tip, which is confirming your audience. And when we talk about confirming an audience, we mean a couple of different things. And a classic example of that is a company we work with called Perfect Bar. There's a case study on our website, but it was really fascinating. They looked in and had been doing social engagement for a number of years and found that they were stagnating in the amount of engagement that they were driving. And that was a little bit frustrating for them. They were putting up messaging based on what they thought their audience was. And in this case, they thought it was male endurance sports enthusiast. But they used a couple of tools, including RivalIQ, to really start to look at what their audience was and what parts of that audience were actually engaging. And what they discovered is that their primary audience wasn't really male endurance sports enthusiasts. It was nutrition-conscious active women 25 to 44. And that was the audience that was actually driving the best engagement on social channels. And so they were able to adjust their messaging, basically changing images from men doing rock climbing to women 25 to 44 working out to better align what their market was and who they wanted to engage with. And there are a couple different ways that you can confirm your audience. And so we talked about confirming our audience. We mean basically two things. And let me show you some data that highlights that. The first is a channel. So taking a look at where our audience is. And that's as simple as taking a look at our data and understanding where those people are right now. So we'll take a look here at detail metrics and understanding where are we posting, and given where we're posting, is that really where our audience is? So making smart choices about where we're investing time and energy in posts. So if we're investing time and energy into Twitter, for instance, but Twitter is an incredibly small portion of our engagement total, maybe we need to back off how many times we're tweeting and focus more on Facebook and Instagram if we're not cross-posting, because that's really where we're driving our content and our engagement. And so maybe we need to focus in on those audiences. It's also understanding what that audience looked at. So for our example, and with the team from Perfect Bar, they really looked and digged into the demographic data behind their audience. So they looked at not only where their audience is, but in this case, they used Facebook Insights, which you're seeing here on our integration, to take a look at the demographic makeup of that audience. They were skewing at males. They were skewing at males in the 35 to 44 range. And what they found when they actually looked at audience in terms of where they were and who they were, it was actually women who were 25 to 34. And you can do this analysis in a number of different tools. I happen to be showing you RivalIQ. You can look at this at Facebook Insights. There are a number of different tools from the platform that will provide you this sort of information so you can make sure that the messaging you're providing is really targeted at the market you have rather than the market you think you have. That takes us to tip number 4, which is the use of video. What we've heard over and over from our clients who actually take a look at their video or at their video engagement is that video engagement is incredibly important and drives engagement at a higher rate than almost any other post type. And that's critical when you start to think about the level of engagement a video drives versus a photo or a status update. When we're talking about liking a photo or looking at a photo and the amount of time and engagement that takes versus looking at a video, which takes a longer period of time and provides you more imaging and more messaging, having videos, if they are going to resonate with your audience, is incredibly important. It allows you to tell a story. It allows you to really relate your brand messaging in a way that photos and status updates simply don't allow you to do. And so a lot of times when we're talking with existing clients, we tell them, let's look at competitors, let's look at people who are targeting the same audience and get a feel for whether or not video is a medium that's going to resonate with an audience. And that's pretty simple to do. You can be as simple as looking at the YouTube statistics for primary competitors that you've identified. Or you can use a tool like RivalIQ and go in and take a look at something as simple as social posts. And so here I'm looking at a series of fashion brands, and I'm looking at a collection of, I think, 14 fashion brands and data going back 30 days to really look at post type to understand how video is performing in this particular segment. So even though video makes up a very small portion of the overall activity here, we look at the engagement rate for video, it is second only to photos. And when you really start to think about that, it's pretty amazing because the amount of time and energy it takes for a consumer to engage in a video versus a photo is entirely different. And the key here is that the video doesn't have to be professionally done. It can be something as simple as pasting and posting a webinar with your sales guide onto your various social channels. It can be as simple as repurposing video that you have from events. It can be as simple as a speech, or it can be as simple as using legacy content from media campaigns and from advertising campaigns on your social media channels. The last tip that we come up with a lot is publish and listen. And the example we use here is of RivalIQ itself. A lot of times we think of, and we've found people who think of social media as a one-way street. It's simply another advertising medium to push a message out. And the problem with that is that it ignores the unique properties that are available to us within social media and the unique opportunity that social media gives us to communicate on a personal basis with the audience that we're trying to reach. And so what we found, and what we found personally, is that when you use social media to start conversations, not only pushing content, but reacting to those reactions from your audience and reacting to audience posts, you can see an absolutely humongous increase in the amount of authentic engagement. So in this example here at RivalIQ, we made a conscious decision at the beginning of this year to switch from simply pushing out messaging to making sure we reacted to every time somebody mentioned RivalIQ, to making sure that we followed up on any comments or posts on any of our publicly facing pages, and really having authentic conversations with our audience. And the results for us were staggering. We saw in the last 10 months an increase on Facebook of 36% in terms of our social audience. But we think more importantly, we saw an increase in over 200% in our social engagement. So really driving and getting people to talk about what they liked and disliked about our platform so that we could better understand who we were selling to and make better decisions about what content we could push out. And that sort of strategy had pretty amazing results. And measuring and looking at the data behind this isn't that difficult. You could use basically the built-in tools within Facebook Insights to tell you exactly your growth in terms of both audience engagement. You can also use, obviously, a tool like RivalIQ. So here we've got plugged in RivalIQ. We can see page likes for the time period that we talked about, versus the time period before, and having that same kind of benchmark we talked about in tip 1, we were able to look at where we were, how we grew, and how that change in strategy fundamentally changed how we reached out and covered our clients. So let's recap. 5 tips for doing it. The first and foremost is setting benchmarks, understanding where you are in your social media landscape. Are your engagement rates what you think they are? Where are your followers? Are they on Facebook? Are they on Instagram? Are they on Twitter? Or are they video-based on YouTube? Follow your competition. Understand what your competition is placing out there from a social media perspective, how they're messaging to the same audience you're trying to reach, and what messages they're putting out there that are resonating with your clients and the audience that you'd like to sell to. Confirm your audience. Really understand who is engaging with you on social media, whether that be by channel, so understanding where the audience is, or the demographics behind that audience. So are the images that you're putting out there appropriate for the people who are actually engaging with your content? Are you messaging in a way that's going to resonate with the audience that you actually have versus the audience you think you have? Use video. Nothing complex, but use simple video to drive deeper conversations and be able to put a more complex message and more complete message in front of your social audience. And then finally, publish and listen. Social media is not a one-way street. If you're only publishing content onto social media, you're losing and leaving the potential for social media and leaving the potential investment in social media that you can gain. Really engage your audience, because engagement will drive not only audience and increases in audience, but that engagement that's so important in terms of building your social brand. We've left a little time here at the end for Q&A. I'm going to let Danica follow up with a few questions for us that we've gotten from our audience.
Yeah, Michael, we do have a couple questions. The first one, somebody asks about comparative benchmarking. Can you discuss and review the difference between comparative benchmarking versus regular benchmarking? Yeah,
that's a good example and a good question. So a lot of times you'll hear us use the terms comparative benchmarking versus competitive benchmarking, and it's fairly simple and straightforward. A competitive benchmark is that when we're dealing with benchmarks around a direct competitor. So in the Tesla example I showed you before, we were showing people who are selling direct competitors, so automobiles to the same marketplace, to the same version of customers who are trying to buy at the same time. In a comparative, often what we're doing is including companies that are aspirational, companies that may be selling a product or trying to reach the same audience you are, but not directly competing for you on a dollar-by-dollar day basis. If we're looking back at the examples that we went through, the Lung Cancer Alliance is a classic example of that. They looked at other nonprofits. Those other nonprofits weren't necessarily competitors of the Lung Cancer Alliance, but they were trying to reach a similar audience, and so knowing what messaging they used was incredibly important for them.
Okay, we have one more question. What's the one thing I can go do right now after this webinar?
Yeah, so the first thing that I always tell people to start with is the first thing that we covered today, which is benchmarking. You can't measure whether or not you're doing well or poorly without knowing where you came from. So having a clear baseline and understanding where you are today will help you understand whether the efforts that you're putting forth, the money that you're investing in social media, and the time you're investing in social media is effective. Without that baseline, without understanding where you are and how you're doing, you're never going to be able to understand whether what you're doing and what changes you've made were successful.
All right, those are all the questions that we have today.
Hey, thank you all very much for taking the time to sit in. I know it's valuable time out of your day. We're always excited to talk to other digital marketing specialists and people who are focused on social media. If you have any follow-up questions, you'll be getting emails from us with a recording of the webinar. We'd be happy to answer any questions after this conversation as well. Feel free to email us at support@rivaliq.com, or you can follow up with the email that's going to be in your inbox here in the next day or two. Again, I appreciate your time. My name is Michael Gilbro, and have an excellent day.